Carlos Joseph Condit is an American mixed martial artist, competing in the welterweight division of the Ultimate Fighting Championship. Condit is the former interim UFC Welterweight Champion and a former WEC Welterweight Champion. As of August 3, 2014, he is number 3 in official UFC welterweight rankings. 27 of Condit's 29 wins have come by way of knockout or submission. Condit formerly fought in the UFC's sister promotion, World Extreme Cagefighting, where he was the final WEC Welterweight Champion. He also competed for both Shootboxing and Pancrase in Japan. Condit now trains at Jackson Submission Fighting out of Albuquerque, New Mexico. Early life: Condit attended Cibola High School on Albuquerque's west side. He began wrestling at the age of 9 and continued throughout high school, and started training in Gi Dojutsu under Greg Jackson at 15. Mixed martial arts, background and early career: Carlos Condit turned professional at 18 years old, taking less than a minute to submit Nick Rescorta with a rear naked choke in his debut Juarez, Mexico on September 6, 2002. He also won his next 4 fights in the first round, with only one going past the 1-minute mark, before tasting defeat for the first time, albeit under the shootboxing rule set, in his international debut. He faced off with 95-fight veteran and Shootboxing World Tournament 2002 champion Andy Saw in Tokyo, Japan on September 23, 2003, losing by technical knockout with 17 seconds left of the fight after being knocked down 3 times in the 5th and final round. Returning to MMA, Condit continued his impressive run of form in the sport with a further 3 first-round stoppage wins to go 8-0 before he was submitted with a Carlo Prater triangle choke inside the opening round in Albuquerque on September 11, 2004. He rebounded from the loss with a 4-fight win streak and returned to Japan to fight in Pancrase, losing to Satoru Kichioka via first-round heel hook submission at Pancrase, Spiral 8 in Yokohama on October 2, 2005. Following this, he had a stint in the Hawaii-based Rumble on the Rock promotion and defeated Rossi Barra ± via TKO in his promotional debut before going on to compete in the ROTO welterweight tournament. The tournament's quarter-finals were held on January 20, 2006 at Rumble on the Rock 8, where Condit recorded a 17-second TKO stoppage of Renato Verissimo. The semis and the final both took place on the same night, April 21, 2006, at Rumble on the Rock 9, and Condit submitted Frank Trigg with a triangle choke armor hybrid to book his place in the final against Jake Shields. Going the distance for the first time in his career, Condit lost by unanimous decision. Condit suffered a second consecutive loss in his next outing, submitting to a Pat Healy rear naked choke in round 3 of their contest in Oakland, California, before making a return to Pancrase and defeating Koji Oishi via TKO in his sophomore appearance in the promotion. He ended his tenure in Japan with a Kimura submission of Takuya Iwata and a particularly violent stomp KO over Tatsunori Tanaka before returning stateside and joining the WEC World Extreme Cagefighting. Condit made his debut for the WEC at WEC 25, where he defeated Carl Jensen in the first round via submission. Condit's second fight would be for the vacant WEC Welterweight Championship against John Alessio at WEC 26. Condit would win this fight in the second round, once again, by rear naked choke and became the WEC Welterweight Champion. Condit will then defend the title against Brock Larson at WEC 29 and Carlo Prater at WEC 32, defeating both by submission in the first round. Condit's final defense would be against Hiromitsu Miura at WEC 35. The fight would end via TKO in the 4th round, winning Fight of the Night honors, which meant that Condit would be the last ever WEC welterweight champion after the UFC dissolved the title and division. Condit's record in the WEC would end at a perfect 5-0. Ultimate Fighting Championship: Condit would make the move to UFC after the WEC buyout, and he made his debut in the Ultimate Fighting Championship organization, losing via a very close split decision against Martin Kampmann at UFC Fight Night 18. The fight was close enough that Fight Metric ruled the bout a draw. He was then scheduled to fight Chris Lytle on September 16, 2009, at UFC Fight Night 19, but Lytle had to drop out due to a knee injury. UFC newcomer Jake Ellenberger would step up to replace Lytle. Condit then defeated Ellenberger via split decision to get his first win in the UFC. Condit later had to drop out of a scheduled fight at UFC 108 against Paul Daly due to a hand injury. Condit defeated Rory MacDonald via third-round TKO at UFC 115 in a bout that earned the Fight of the Night award. Although MacDonald seemed to get the better of the first two rounds with effective striking and takedowns, Condit came back with a more aggressive attitude in the final round, finishing MacDonald with a combination of elbows and short punches. Condit faced Dan Hardy on October 16, 2010, at UFC 120. In the first round, Condit connected with a powerful left hook during an exchange, which dropped Hardy. Condit then landed two punches to Hardy on the ground before the referee stopped the fight at 4:27 of the first round. This victory made Condit the first man to defeat Hardy by way of KO and also earned him Knockout of the Night honors. Condit was expected to face Chris Lytle on February 27, 2011, at UFC 127. However, Condit was forced from the bout after suffering a knee injury while training and he was replaced by promotional newcomer Brian Ebersol. Condit faced Dong Hyun Kim on July 2, 2011, at UFC 132. Condit won the fight via first-round KO, earning Knockout of the Night honors. This fight gave Kim his first professional MMA loss. Condit was expected to face BJ Penn on October 29, 2011 at UFC 137. However, UFC President Dana White announced at the UFC 137 press conference that Condit will no longer face Penn and instead replace Nick Diaz, who had failed to show up for any event-related press appearances, and face Georges St. Pierre for the UFC Welterweight Championship at UFC 137. On October 18, 2011, it was announced that St. Pierre had pulled out of the fight due to a knee injury. After conferring with his management and UFC officials, Condit elected not to compete against a replacement fighter at UFC 137, but faced St. Pierre in early 2012. However, after Diaz defeated Penn at UFC 137, officials decided to have St. Pierre fight Diaz at UFC 143. Condit was expected to face Josh Koscheck on February 4, 2012 at UFC 143. However, due to a knee injury sustained by St. Pierre, Condit faced Diaz at the event, with the winner being awarded an interim UFC Welterweight Championship. Condit defeated Diaz via unanimous decision to win the UFC Interim Welterweight Championship. Condit faced Georges St. Pierre on November 17, 2012, at UFC 154. Condit became only the second man to knock down St. Pierre in the UFC when he dropped him with a head kick early in the third round and swarmed him, but was unable to finish. He ultimately lost the fight via unanimous decision in a back-and-forth battle which earned both participants Fight of the Night honors for their performance. After the bout, St. Pierre stated Condit was the best fighter he's ever fought. Condit was expected to face Rory MacDonald in a rematch on March 16, 2013, at UFC 158. However, MacDonald pulled out of the bout citing an injury, and was replaced by Jimi Hendrix. While Condit was able to outstrike Hendrix significantly for the majority of the fight, Hendrix was able to score multiple takedowns in each round, earning Hendrix a unanimous decision victory. Their performance earned both participants Fight of the Night honors. Condit faced Martin Kampmann in a rematch on August 28, 2013 at UFC Fight Night 27. After a first round which saw Kampmann control the action with his wrestling, Condit was able to utilize his more varied arsenal of strikes for the remainder of the bout to get the TKO in the fourth round via a series of punches and knees, avenging his previous loss. The fight also earned Condit his third consecutive Fight of the Night bonus award. Condit was expected to face Matt Brown on December 14, 2013 at UFC on Fox 9. However, in the week leading up to the event, Brown pulled out of the bout citing a back injury. As a result, Condit was removed from the card as well. Condit next fought Tyron Woodley in the co-main event at UFC 171. In round 2, Woodley landed on Condit's right knee on a takedown. The referee stood the fight up for inactivity, and when Condit tried to step away after Woodley kicked his left knee, his right buckled, causing him to collapse in agony and the referee to award Woodley a TKO. An MRI confirmed that Condit had suffered a torn ACL and partially torn meniscus which would require surgery. Personal life: Condit is of German and Mexican descent. Condit's father, Brian, was the chief of staff for former New Mexico governor and Democratic presidential candidate Bill Richardson. Condit married his longtime girlfriend, Siga Marie McCullough, in December 2010. The couple welcomed their first child, a son, in March 2010. Championships and accomplishments: Mixed Martial Arts, World Extreme Cagefighting, WEC Welterweight Championship, 3 successful title defenses, undefeated in the WEC, Fight of the Night. Ultimate Fighting Championship, Interim UFC Welterweight Championship, Fight of the Night, Knockout of the Night. Rumble on the Rock Welterweight Tournament runner-up. Mavela.com, 2012 Fight of the Year vs Georges St-Pierre. Professional boxing record, kickboxing record, mixed martial arts record, references. External links. Official website, Carlos Condit's UFC profile, Carlos Condit's WEC profile at the Wayback Machine, professional MMA record for Carlos Condit from Sherdog, Carlos Condit's greatest KOs.